point out that the sun shines down its power to all the world and makes the wind blow strong as it will. I wonder hope gentle rains can fall upon the land, so lovely earth can stay lovely still. Hello, everybody. I'm George Harvey, and this is Tom Fennell.
Hello there.
And this is
I just did this.
I think you just said goodbye, and now we're saying hello. That's because
Wasn't there a song about that? You say goodbye, I say hello.
That's right,
yeah.
the Beatles. I put together a list. You know, Tom and I have been doing this show for over a year now, and we're here practically every Thursday doing the recording. Today happens to be Friday. But each week it's about 20 items that I take off my geoharvey.wordpress.com website, which has about 10 to 15 items a day, which means that I look at maybe 100 items and pick the 20th that I think are the best. And yesterday, New Year's Day, I spent all day looking at the 1,000 or so articles that we've talked about in the last year, picking.
Yeah, we've done 1,000 articles.
Yeah,
That's
about.
amazing.
And I thought, I'd pick the 10 that I like the best, and we'd talk about them. I cut the list down from about 1,000 to 144. And that list is at the geoharvey.wordpress.com website. You can find it there, and it's in the pages, which are on the left of the screen. And it's right at the top of the list with this thing that we're going to be talking about, which is the 20 that I gleaned from that list of 144. And Tom's got it up on the screen.
Yeah, right? This is the list of 20.
The list of 20.
It's too small for you to read there, so we're not going to.
It is organized in alphabetical order, not the ones that I think are the most important. And Tom, you could say if you think something is super important or maybe the most important of the year as we go through.
As we go through, yeah. Because every one of these things is significant.
Yeah, and you're allowed to say, no, I made a mistake. The last one I said was the most important. It's second. This is the most important. And you can do that over and over again if you want. The first item is from the 11th of January from Clean Technica. A look at peer-reviewed articles on climate change in scientific journals from November 12th, 2012 through December 31, 2013, found 2,258 articles written by a total of 9,136 authors. Most of these articles had multiple authors. Only a single article by a single author rejected man-made global warming.
Well, we've talked about that one, and he didn't reject it. Didn't he just say, I don't know anything about it?
No. 97% of them said this is a problem. It's real and it's a problem. 3% didn't comment. They just wrote an article on it without saying whether they believed it or not. This guy said, I don't believe it.
I don't believe it. Oh, okay.
And he also said in the introduction, I'm really happy I found that this isn't true, because if it's true, it's going to destroy the economy of Russia.
Oh.
There are other things that are related to Russia that it will also destroy, one of which is Koch Industries, and another of which is, a few other things that are run in ways that have learned lessons from the Russians.
I just adjusted it so that it's a little bit easier to read.
A little bit easier to read. So should we go to the next item?
Absolutely.
Okay. Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory and the University of Connecticut analyzed more than 122,000 home sales near 26 wind facilities in densely populated Massachusetts and were unable to find any impacts to nearby home property values. This is from
Now that's an interesting thing, because it's one of the objections to wind power that you hear is, it destroys property values.
Wind Power Engineering had that on the 18th of January. The first time I heard that, I was at a meeting and there were a couple of people who were local, and they stood up and they were obviously livid, absolutely livid at the idea of wind turbines being put up anywhere in Vermont because they said they would reduce the power, drive the price of property down 40 to 50%. And the fellow who is making this argument said, I know this is true, or one of the people, I know this is true because a friend of mine who's a realtor told me so.
Well, there you go. I mean,
and
what could be more reliable than that?
Yeah. The thing that it reminded me of was when I was in college at Pratt Institute, which is in Brooklyn.
Yeah.
And that area of Brooklyn was called the worst slum in the United States at that time. And it was very, very attractive, beautiful brownstone houses, which were for upper middle class people. They had been occupied at one time by lawyers and accountants and architects and doctors and university professors. But what had happened was that during the 1930s, they had a colored realty office and a white realty office that were operated by the same company. And when you went into the white realty office and said, I want to sell my brownstone, they would say, well, you know, we have to ask this question. I hope you don't mind. And don't be concerned about your answer because it's all private. It's all, you know. But would you be willing to sell your brownstone to a family of color? And inevitably, somebody would say, oh, sure, I would do that. And then when that happened, the account was turned over to the colored office. Mm-hmm. And that office would sell the property, and the moment that property closed, the realtors from the white office would run up and down the streets in the local area, going from door to door, telling people, you've got to sell your property now. The value is going to be destroyed because a black family just moved in.
Yep.
And inevitably, that, you know, the property values were destroyed, and they were destroyed by realtors. They were destroyed by realtors.
Just to make money.
Just to make money, because they didn't make money on the value of the property.
There's a word for that, isn't there, Rick?
Cheating.
Well, yeah,
stealing,
but I mean, no, there's a word that describes that exact thing in the real estate business.
But that thing about the wind turbines reminded me of that.
Well, it's interesting because I read another article that said, on the rumor, property values go down.
Yes.
And after the construction, they go up again.
Go up again. That actually was the same article. I remember that from that article. We should keep going, Tom.
Yeah, why not? We got 20 of these things.
Yeah, we do. On the 11th of February, we got this from Morningstar magazine. Decommissioning Sellafield nuclear power station in the UK will cost taxpayers at least £70 billion.
Why are the taxpayers paying for it?
Yeah, good question. As costs hit astonishing levels in quote, senior MPs said today, and they went on to say, what's worse is that the cost will likely continue to rise. Sellafield was a government plant.
Okay.
And it was the plant where the Windscale fire happened, which was one of the first really big nuclear disasters. One of the things that happened at Sellafield was that somebody lost 200 pounds of, I think it was 200 pounds, but it might have been 200 kilos of plutonium. And you can't raise cattle anywhere in the area because the milk will have plutonium in it.
Yeah.
And I mean, this place is a nightmare. It is an absolute nightmare. It has poisoned the Irish Sea. The Irish are really upset at the English, and you can't blame them because there are parts of the Irish Sea where you shouldn't be fishing. Mm-hmm. And you know this, but 70 billion pounds, which is way over $100 billion.
Yep.
And this is okay. This is the legacy of nuclear power. Should we go on?
Why not?
Okay. China's premier Li Keqiang.
Good one. You got it.
Maybe I did. I don't know. I can tell you I didn't because I didn't intone it right. Has declared war on pollution, outlining significant steps the Chinese will take to improve their air quality. China has suffered from truly epic smog over the last 2 winters. That from Echo Monitor on the 7th of March.
7th of March, yep.
Yeah.
I just read something, I think yesterday.
Yeah.
That a lot of the students higher level, PhD students
Yeah.
from China that are studying in Europe and the U.S. aren't going back to China, not because of the money, not because of the jobs.
I think you can
They
make
don't
more
want to
money
go
in
back to the
China.
pollution.
Yeah, I think you can make more money in
You probably
China.
can, but they're specifically staying in the West because
Because of the pollution.
of the pollution.
Yeah. Yeah.
And China's well aware of this now, and they're taking
Well,
steps.
every
but-
time I think about this, I think about the 7-year-olds in northern China who are coming down with lung cancer,
Yeah.
types associated in the United States with tobacco.
Wow.
And that's bad. Okay, our fifth item in this list of 20, and these are just chronological. They're not. There's
Yep.
no attempt to order them by importance. In new estimates released today, the World Health Organization reports that in 2012, around 7 million people died, 1 in 8 global deaths, as a result of air pollution exposure. This confirms that air pollution is now the world's largest single environmental health risk. This from India.com Health on the 25th of March.
And we don't even talk about this. I mean, this is a worldwide problem, and it's just out there.
Yeah.
There's nothing we can
Well,
do about it.
this is the cost of progress.
Well, yeah, it is. It's an unseen cost of progress
Right.
because very few people are probably even aware of these statistics.
Yeah, I remember.
Oh,
as a
somebody
child,
died, a whole bunch of Indians died, or that.
But who cares? They're Indians,
Yeah.
I mean, really, this is where it comes from. Is well, I mean, if these people are too stupid, so stupid that they live in places that are heavily polluted, then they deserve to die.
I've heard that argument.
Really, this is as boneheaded
I've heard
as
that
it gets.
argument,
It's
yeah.
as mean and corrupt as it gets. And it reminds me of being a child and looking out. And we had a beautiful view. We lived on a mountaintop, and sitting with my Aunt Ruth, and looking out and seeing the plume of smoke that came up from a cement kiln, and saying, "I wish that wasn't there." And Aunt Ruth saying, "That's jobs, George.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
jobs.
yeah.
That's progress."
Yep.
Okay.
I remember driving along the Mass Pike,
Yes.
and there's a spot there where there's a big, really nice overlook in the north of a valley.
Yeah.
And right smack dab in the middle of that valley was a paper plant, spewing, just spewing. I stood there in wonderment because it was a beautiful view, and it was destroyed by this paper mill. At that time, I decided what I was going to do was try and search around New England for similar views and come up with a calendar.
Oh.
But I never got around to it.
Oh, dear.
I have been by that place since, and the paper mill's closed.
Yeah, I'm not surprised.
You can
mills
still see it, but it's
yeah.
not spewing anymore.
paper mills have been they've been on the environmental impact of paper is really
It's been big.
It's been extremely big. Okay,
Another one that we don't think much about is cement.
Cement is a serious problem.
It is
Huge
that.
problem. And I would love to see somebody come up with an alternative for cement that didn't require the amount of energy cement uses. And there are some out there.
Oh, they're out there, yeah.
Okay, on the 18th of April, from the Christian Science Monitor, we got this thing. A small county in Northern California has become the first county government in the state to become grid energy positive. Yolo County, population 200,000, just west of Sacramento County, now produces 152% more energy from solar panels than it uses.
Well, that's significant.
Yeah.
That's significant. Just
Yeah.
west of Sacramento County, so it's like in the center of the state.
Yeah, sort of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
152% more energy than they use.
Yep. Although reading, I should actually. It's been months since I saw this article, and I picked that out. But I think it refers just to the county government, not to the county as a whole.
Aha.
But still, that is significant.
Yeah, Yolo County, you can't really tell specifically. Is it the county or the county?
I think it's
the political county.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's hard to tell. It would be nice to think that it would be the county as a whole. Okay, Clean Technica on the 3rd of May had this article. According to the International Monetary Fund, when you factor in implicit subsidies from failure to charge for pollution, climate change, and other externalities, the post-tax cost of support for fossil fuels comes close to $2 trillion each year.
So we're talking subsidies. We're talking big-time
talking
subsidies that
about
nobody's
big-time.
even aware of.
That's right. These organizations, these fossil fuel organizations, are getting $600 billion, according to the last reliable accounting that I have seen, $600 billion a year in direct subsidies.
These are indirect subsidies.
But what's happening is when you combine that with the indirect subsidies, it comes to $2 trillion. And the indirect subsidies, pollution, they're figuring pollution is $1 trillion a year. Climate change, I don't know how
you can
measure that, because what's going to happen is if we don't get the climate change under control, we're going to be talking about trillions of dollars a year just for that. And I mean, the global, the rise of the oceans. What's that going to do to New York City?
It's going to submerge it.
What's it going to do to Boston? What's it going to do
Virtually
to
every
New Haven,
every coastal
Providence,
city,
Rhode Island, Newark, Philadelphia, Washington D.C. You know, I mean,
Savannah, Georgia,
Georgia, Charleston, South Carolina,
and virtually all of Florida.
Yeah, virtually all of Florida. What's going to happen to New Orleans?
San Francisco, New Orleans.
It's going to be like Katrina every day.
Yeah.
You know, and it's this is something that in Vermont you can say, oh well, you know, we're not at sea level. I got news for you. I've seen the picture of the effects of climate change projected on Vermont, and it is scary.
What I see happening is large-scale processes for pulling carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere and sequestering it.
Absolutely.
Are going to be done by big business. They're going to be huge, and they're going to be subsidized.
And they're going to be profitable.
And they're going to be very profitable.
Right. And there is already a huge business, one of the biggest businesses on Earth, that is in the business of pulling carbon out of the atmosphere and making it into usable forms. Mm-hmm. And that's called agriculture. Mm-hmm. So this is not outrageous. And you know, if you can, all you've got to do is change the way agriculture is done. And there have been a bunch of studies that have been done that basically say, yeah, you can do biochar. You can transform deserts into green territory by using biochar. Yeah. And the amount of Tomas, who was here as a guest.
Yep. What was his last name?
What was his last
I can't remember it either.
I don't remember his last name.
Yeah.
He said that bogs trap a multiple of the carbon that forests do. Mm-hmm. And you know, a lot of this stuff can be used for various purposes, but we don't have to use it. We can just let it be.
Well, as an example, it's possible to transform carbon dioxide into calcium carbonate.
It's possible to form
and that's granite. Not granite, that's limestone.
Limestone, yeah.
So you can build with it.
Yeah, and if you could do that properly, you might be able to make it directly into a substitute for concrete.
Well, what's concrete? Calcium carbonate that's been burned.
That's right. Okay.
So there's a lot of opportunity there.
There's more opportunities.
And you know what? There's people out there thinking about it.
We have more opportunities than we have problems.
Yeah.
We have far more opportunities than we have problems.
Yeah, I'll buy that.
And, you know, it's just a matter of developing the ones that are going to work the best. Next, from The Ecologist, this on the 10th of June, a decision by parties to an obscure convention has huge implications for Europe's aging nuclear reactors. License extensions for nuclear reactors must follow environmental impact assessments which compare to the potential impacts to those of alternatives including wind, solar, and other renewables.
So that's interesting. So what it's saying is, as they get into the renewal for these plants, which were not built to be renewed in the first place,
Right.
they're going to have to make a balance as to whether it makes more sense to renew this license or
And if
to
you look at what's
develop
happening
renewables.
at Indian Point, you can see how difficult this makes things for the nuclear power plants, because they need a way to cool, to get rid of their excess heat, and that excess heat is
Goes into the Hudson River.
Yep, and that's approximately 2/3 of the energy that they release. A third of it goes into electricity. 2/3 of it is excess heat.
There's waste.
Waste heat that goes into the atmosphere, that goes into the Hudson River, that goes out to sea, that goes wherever. And they're going to have to make a case for the idea that has an environmental impact that is favorably comparable to the impact of solar, wind, and these beautiful organic flow batteries we're going to have.
Yeah.
So that's that one. Okay, and the next one is one which I think is really, really important, and that is the use of excessive powers to regulate The use of executive powers to regulate greenhouse gas emissions has been affirmed by the U.S. Supreme Court in a ruling issued on Monday. That's the Monday prior to the 26th of June. This suggests that President Obama's climate policy has solid legal foundations, and that came from the Carbon Brief. And I think that probably also applies to what the EPA was doing. And in fact, the Supreme Court had already decided that the EPA was required by law to regulate carbon.
Well, this is kind of a biggie because the industry's been fighting the government on regulation.
And still
now
is.
the Supreme Court has said they got the right to do it.
That's right.
And if they got the right to do it, they'll do it.
Yeah, and the EPA plan on carbon emissions came out after this decision. So, they're going to have trouble trying to get that plan to be. Okay, next, on Saturday and Sunday, this is being the Saturday and Sunday before the 14th of July, in Oklahoma, there were 7 earthquakes. As of last month, Oklahoma has surpassed California in the number of earthquakes. It's possible that hydraulic fracturing or fracking may have played a role, do you think, in causing them?
I think it's more than possible.
More than possible.
They're different kind of earthquakes than California gets, though.
Yeah.
They're not really very, very destructive.
They're destructive enough.
Well, any earthquake can be.
Yeah, I've seen pictures of collapsed chimneys and stuff like
but they're
that.
collapsing chimneys, not whole buildings. And not that I'm trying to excuse it.
Yeah, I know.
It's a second order consequence of fracking that the industry just as soon forget about.
Yeah, and they have other problems as well. That came, by the way, from CNN on the 14th of July. On the 29th of July, we got this. The American Wind Energy Association has just come out with some facts and figures about the so-called hidden cost of wind power. According to the AWEA's calculations, the hidden costs of conventional power plants in Texas is 17 times more than that of wind. That was in Clean Technica. And this is important. If you think of, the idea the wind and solar are intermittent forms of power, I got news for you. Every form of power is intermittent.
Oh, yeah. It's just a matter of how intermittent it is.
Yeah,
and when.
And the nuclear power plants are the steadiest in that sense, and they have to be taken down every 18 months or 24 months to be refueled, which is a month or more. And the point of that is that every power plant has got to have a backup. And the way that this works is that the utilities and the various transmission organizations and so forth want to make sure that when you go into your bathroom at 2 o'clock in the morning, throw the switch, the lights will come on, even if you've got a nuclear plant next door, which is refueling at the moment. And so the question of solar and wind is not whether it's intermittent and whether the lights will come on, because the utilities will make the lights come on. The question is, what do the utilities have to do, and
How much it costs.
how much it's going to cost. And it turns out that whatever the percent, I think it's like 17% or 19% or something that was wind in Texas, what that percent was as opposed to the 63% or whatever it was that was conventional. And it turns out that when you do the math, I did the math, when you do the math, it costs about 3 times as much in the utility bill for the cost of backup for nuclear, coal, and gas as it does for solar and wind. And the reason is easy enough to understand when you figure, well, if this wind farm goes down, that wind farm is still going to be producing. If all of the wind farms go down, we bring in power from outside. But then during the day, when we've got peak load, we're likely to have solar. And you can store power in a variety of different ways, some of which are already out there. We've talked about the Northfield Mountain plant, which has been there for over 40 years, pumped storage. Its output exceeds what Vermont Yankee was originally designed to produce by about double. And so what they're saying is basically in a power grid that consists of solar, wind, biomass, a few other, hydro, and possibly other resources, together with storage of some kind, the cost of power is going to be lower than and it's probably going to be more reliable than you would get out of conventional systems of the types that were developed in the 1920s.
So these hidden costs, for the most part, are the costs of maintaining these standby power sources that are only sitting there for when they're needed.
That's right. Yep.
And the costs are built into the electrical power, the electrical rate.
That's right.
So the users of power are basically the ones that are paying the hidden costs.
We had an article that came up. It was in my blog about a week ago, and I didn't actually put in the number that was in the article because, frankly, I didn't believe it. But knowing what I already knew, I realized that it was theoretically possible. And what the article said was that at a particular point on a particular day in a particular place in the United States, they had come to a point where the cost of electrical power had gone to $5,000 per kilowatt hour. Now, that would be $5,000 per kilowatt hour on the wholesale spot market.
Spot market.
I don't believe it.
But it probably did happen, but it was only for a few seconds.
So my guess is that it didn't go to $5,000 per kilowatt hour. It went to $5,000 per megawatt hour, which is which is about
thousand times.
It's about $5 per kilowatt hour. But I've seen the cost of power go to $11,000 per megawatt hour, which is $11 per kilowatt hour. And, this is, anyway.
I can see how you could make that mistake.
I can see how a person would make that mistake. I didn't put it in because I just thought it's too likely that it's wrong. And if I say what the article was saying without going into that particular detail, the information is still there for people. Okay, the next item comes from Green Tech Media. And this is on the 19th of August. And let me just check and make sure I didn't skip something. Nope, I didn't skip something. A just-released Department of Energy and Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory report pegs utility-scale wind power purchase agreement pricing as averaging $25 per megawatt hour for projects that were negotiated in contracts signed in 2013. That's cheap power. That from Green Tech Media on the 19th of August.
That's 2.5 cents per kilowatt hour.
That's 2.5 cents.
That is cheap.
That's the average price of power purchase agreements for wind power. That is absolutely outrageously low.
Yeah.
And it's enough, when you consider the comparable prices for the comparable price per megawatt hour for natural gas, which is, according to everybody, killing nuclear because it's so cheap, is about 6 cents per kilowatt hour. Mm-hmm. And the price for nuclear is about 10.5. Mm-hmm. And the price for coal is about 13. because the coal has got all these things that they've got to do to make sure that they've got their emissions right, and that's just going to get worse.
And it should.
And it should. And solar, by the way, is pressing hard on natural gas.
Yes, it is.
Very similar price to natural gas. Even though natural gas prices are low, solar is beating it
And that's a negative
in
bubble.
some places. What?
That's a negative bubble.
That's a negative bubble.
Not going to happen for long.
What's not going to happen for long?
Natural gas prices being cheap.
Natural gas prices being cheap. I absolutely agree.
That's me. It's just reminding me that something's happening
In
half
15
an hour.
minutes. In half an hour. Okay. So we will try to get you out of here before that half hour is up, Tom.
That's no big deal. I'm only going across the street.
Okay. We did the earthquakes. We did the. Yeah. Do we need to go on about the price of wind? This means that wind power is the cheapest power by far of any that we can get.
As of now.
Any we can get.
This is all subject to change, but as of now, wind
it
power is coming in really low.
And if you project the changes of power in the future, solar is going to be,
solar are only going to be going down.
Yeah, and the price of solar is probably going to match the price of wind power within 3 or 4 years. And that means once you've done that, you're going to have to come up with a very big excuse for putting up any kind of power plant that is conventional. And it's going to have to be a huge excuse because the peaking plants that they're putting in are in many cases more expensive than lithium-ion batteries, and lithium-ion batteries are more expensive than those beautiful organic flow batteries that we're going to be seeing.
Peaking plants, number one, they're expensive to construct.
They're expensive as all get out.
But number two, they're very expensive to operate.
Yeah.
Even if you use natural gas, the peaking plant is basically it's a jet engine.
Yeah.
And they're very, well, I don't know the numbers in my head, but they're very expensive. And
they're not very efficient.
The utility is willing to pay for it because they are committed to providing the power.
They want to make sure that when you turn your light on, it goes on. And
More so, they want to make sure there's enough to run the factories.
Yes.
They don't like brownouts.
They don't like brownouts. They do not like brownouts, and neither do the factories. And by the way, brownouts can kill your refrigerator.
Yeah, they can. Yeah.
They can.
Yeah.
I think the classic brownout that I'm familiar with is a reduction in voltage, keeping the
frequency steady.
constant.
Yeah,
but
they have to pretty much.
The newer kind that they've been doing is they change the frequency but maintain the voltage.
Only very, very slightly, and it still balances.
Can screw your clock up.
Yeah, it still has to balance.
But it won't destroy your refrigerator.
No. Well, a brownout that destroys a refrigerator is pretty severe.
It's pretty severe, but it's happened. It's happened.
You're getting down there to 90 volts instead of 120 or something like that. Strange things are going to happen.
They had a brownout in Manhattan, and some large, I think it was a meat packing plant or something in Brooklyn, lost its refrigeration system, and the amount of stuff that they had to ditch was just huge.
Wow.
That kind of thing happens. Okay. Our next item comes from PV Magazine. Renewable energy sources accounted for 14.3% of net U.S. electrical generation in the first half of the year, according to a new report from the Energy Information Administration. Last year, the Energy Information Administration forecast that the U.S. would reach 14% mark by 2040. That was on the 28th of August.
That doesn't sound very optimistic. It also indicates, we're here talking about renewables a lot. They're still a very small part of the mix.
They're a small part of the mix, but there's another article that's in here. I think it's in here, and if it isn't, I'll get back to it. It's certainly in the 144 that I did, which talks about solar power is approaching 1%, and at 1% it dominates. And there are reasons for that.
Explain that one. I don't quite get it.
I think you'd have to read the article. Really, I can't explain it to you right here, but I do know that solar power is getting so inexpensive that really right now, people, if I wanted to build a power plant of any kind and I could choose anything that I wanted, but it had to run 24/7 most of the time, I'd have a choice of wind, solar, biomass, combination of those three, with hydro, without hydro, with batteries, without batteries, or I could build gas, nuclear, and so forth. And I would really have to spend some time trying to justify building a nuclear plant, building a coal plant, or building a gas plant. Because it's hard to justify given the figures that we've got.
Exactly that is happening. And the people that are doing the math are the investors.
Yes, that's right.
Wall Street's sitting there and they're looking at this stuff and they're saying, you know, I don't recommend that you invest in this company.
Right, and a bunch of very big organizations, UBS being one of them, Barclays being one of them, Morgan Stanley being one of them. You know, you can just go down this list of investment advisors who are saying, don't get involved in utilities.
Yeah.
Don't get involved in fossil fuels. Don't get involved in coal. And the coal people and the fossil fuel people know this, and they want to make sure that everybody is as confused as possible.
And they're succeeding.
And they are succeeding among certain people, yeah.
Yeah.
So,
but I do think, regardless of the ecological benefits of going to renewables, ultimately what's going to decide it is the math.
it's the math. That's right. And the math is going to have dollar signs involved.
Bingo. Bingo. Absolutely.
But
Money talks.
Yeah, money talks. But one of the things that I think people don't realize, when we're talking about going to renewables, in a lot of people's minds, we're talking about going to renewables and having a lot of insulation in the house and shutting the lights off very carefully, and you know, going through a whole bunch of things, walking, riding
All
a
of
bike,
which are beneficial.
all of which are good.
Yeah.
But the thing that they don't realize is that if we really grab a hold of this as an opportunity and pursue it, we can have a pretty comfortable lifestyle, and in fact, I will say a better lifestyle than we've got now. And the reason for that is because we'll have more money, because power will be cheaper, but so will a huge item, which is our medical bills. And you can go down this whole thing. Our food will be better, our sleep will be better, our breathing will be easier, and we can just go down a whole list of things that, and you know, do we have to live in houses that are 50 degrees and wear winter coats indoors? No, we don't. I don't believe that for a minute. I think, you know, it's going to be very different from that, which, by the way, I am prepared to do and I have done. So, okay.
Well, I know that, and I've said this, the time is going to come, and it's not going to be very long from now, where people look back at this and say, you know, people used to pay for fuel.
They used to pay for power. Yeah. Now it's free. It should always have been free.
Well, I don't think the power itself's ever going to be free, because you got to pay for the infrastructure.
Advertising that comes with it.
Well, the infrastructure's got to be paid for. The maintenance.
The infrastructure has to be there. The connect fee.
But they're not going to be paying for the fuel anymore.
That's right.
And that's definitely going to result in lower power.
And that's the reason why our next item is on the list. One of the most important pieces of news this summer made virtually no headlines at all and seemed only to appear on the websites of the U.S. Energy Information Administration. It is that 127 of the world's largest oil and gas companies are running out of cash.
Wow, that's something to chew on.
Yeah, and
that
guess
is
what?
something to chew on.
The amount of money they're losing exceeds the amount of money that they are given in subsidies.
That's got to be changed.
These guys are losing $1 billion every day.
So where are they losing it? Is it from the costs of exploration, or?
Costs of exploration are $600 billion a year.
Wow. And
this is very, very expensive. It's a very expensive, very big operation. And, you know, I've mentioned this before. If you go to Wikipedia and look up the biggest companies on Earth, you find that of the 63 companies that they list, 21 of them are gas and oil. and one of them, Koch Industries, is coal primarily, although it is in fact a conglomerate. And this is a serious problem, and it is only going to get worse. So my advice to anybody who controls, a multi-billion-dollar retirement fund or something along those lines is divest before it's too late.
Get out of this stuff.
Get out of that stuff.
What
There
you
are
can.
plenty of opportunities in the investment market. You don't have to be involved in coal or gas.
No, you don't.
No. So let's go on. 15. The transition to a global renewable energy economy could save $71 trillion by the year 2050, according to the IEA report. Put another way, the $44 trillion we need to invest in renewable energy in order to get us off climate change and that sort of stuff will wind up in our saving $115 trillion in energy, and that means that the net is going to be $71 trillion in savings. This is from Clean Technica on the 7th of September.
So what you're saying, almost for every dollar you invest in renewables, you're going to save $3.
Almost.
Yeah.
And guess what? That makes it cheap to do it.
It means it's going to happen.
It's going to happen, absolutely. Okay, the next one is not so happy. After a 7-year-long investigation, scientists at the National Audubon Society issued a grim report finding that more than half of the 650 or so bird species in North America may be threatened by global warming. This is from Canada News on the 14th of September.
Well, it's more than just bird species. It's virtually all vertebrate species.
Yeah. We could lose half of all of the multicellular species in the world. Half the fish, brown trout, brook trout rather, forget it, gone. And that's not the only one. We've got lots and lots of things that we can lose. The forests in Vermont are basically slated for destruction, all the trees except for oaks and hickories. And this
The forests are migrating north.
Yeah, and this
So
is
the
actually
forest that we now know
Yep.
is going to be no longer visible in southern Vermont. You're going to have to go further north to see it.
Yep.
And
Out
what's
of
growing
Vermont
down in
eventually.
South Carolina eventually is going to be growing here.
Right, and we will lose our fall colors. We will lose our maple
Yeah.
syrup. We will lose our apple orchards. We will
Yep.
lose, and you.
But we'll be
you
able to
can-
grow peaches.
We'll have pawpaws. I mean,
Pawpaws, yeah.
There's lots of things that we can do.
I never had a pawpaw.
I have. What was it that I read? Have you ever seen one? They look almost
big
like a
things, aren't they?
potato. They look almost like a potato,
Yeah.
and they're full of very big seeds, which are easy to remove. And the flesh in them is very soft and kind of custard-like, and cloying.
Cloying?
Cloying. It's hard to eat more than one pawpaw. They're very tasty, but they're very hard to eat too many of.
Does it make you pucker?
No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. Okay, next, in The Guardian on the 19th of September, ahead of a UN climate summit, institutional investors managing 15 trillion pounds, that is $24.6 trillion, $24.6 trillion of assets, are also calling on governments to phase out subsidies for fossil fuels estimated at 370 billion pounds or $606 billion worldwide a year, 5 times the 60 billion pounds paid to renewable subsidies. So if people are going to tell you that renewables are getting subsidies and they shouldn't, try to explain this one. Why are we paying subsidies to ExxonMobil and Koch Industries?
Lobbying.
Yeah, I guess.
Absolutely. It's a
No
sweetheart
wonder.
deal.
Yeah.
It's been a sweetheart deal since J.P. Morgan and John D. Rockefeller.
Oh, man. If you want to have some fun, when I was in high school, I took a course in economics. And the teacher who taught economics was, first of all, 67 years old and could retire anytime he wanted to, but he didn't feel like retiring. And the kids loved him, and he had a great amount of fun. And he was teaching economics, and from his point of view, the kids in that class were all very, very bright, and they were all probably going to be bank presidents and things like that. So he should teach them about the stock market. So we had our economics book, and we would deal with that about 5 minutes a day, and we'd get a test on it every other month, which was probably about 5% of the grade, and we had to answer a couple of questions about it at the end of the year. But honestly, what he told us about was the stock market. And we knew about the stock market. And I remember the day that somebody came in from, it wasn't Wharton, it was Babson Institute or something like that, where it's an economics thing. And he said to one of the students, would you explain to us the puts, calls, and straddles, and how you would use each one under what circumstances? This kid stood up and he spewed a bunch of stuff. But one of the things that teacher did was he taught us about Hetty Green, and he taught us about Danny Drew, and he taught us about J.P. Morgan and Commodore.
Oh, okay, the robber barons.
And the robber barons, and he taught us about all these little things that they did to rig the system that are now illegal.
Which they're still doing.
They're still doing. They just have different ways to do it, and how they all basically. Some of them died rich and many of them died poor. Carnegie, of course, died basically almost poor because he wanted to. He
gave everything away.
He wanted to give everything away. And so there's something like 10,000 libraries in municipalities in the United States called Carnegie Libraries because he founded them in one way or another, basically gave them their first supply of books.
I don't know if he didn't have any kids or he didn't want to give them any money, but it was something like that.
I don't know. I don't think he had any kids, but certainly he wanted to be a philanthropist, and his goal was to get rid of all his money before he died. Or he wanted to run out of money and die on the same day.
One of these guys named Jim Fisk.
Yeah.
He's buried right here in Brattleboro.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Wow, Jim Fisk.
Got a huge monument. I've seen it.
Oh, dear.
It's over in the Morningside Cemetery.
Is it really?
Yeah.
Oh, dear. Fisk. They did stuff that was just outrageous. Hetty Green.
And they're still doing this kind of stuff.
Hetty Green would buy 51% of the stock in a railroad. And of course, this would cost her millions and millions of dollars. And then what she'd do is set up a holding company and sell 49% in the stock in the holding company. That left her in control of the railroad indirectly, with only a quarter of the investment. But then she'd set up a holding company for that and sell 49%. And she had
like a whole chain of
pyramiding
things,
holding companies so that she was at one point able to control a multi-million-dollar railroad on a $2,000 investment.
Wow.
And of course that became illegal, but it was, and she was doing things that, she was also a difficult woman.
Isn't she local? Wasn't she local?
She came from Vermont.
Bellows Falls or something like that?
Something like that, yeah. And she was once listed in the Guinness Book of World Records or the Guinness Book of Superlatives. The World Records was before this.
Yeah.
Guinness Book of Superlatives was before it.
Before the World Records.
Yeah, as the meanest woman in history.
Wow.
Really. And, okay, so we should probably continue on this thing.
Well, I just want to comment on this thing because the people who are doing this talking are the institutional investors.
Yes, that's right.
This isn't tree huggers.
No, it's not. And actually, I think, I don't know for a fact, but I think this set of $24.6 trillion worth of investment represents two groups, one of which is industrial organizations like General Motors and Ford, and the other is investors that are state retirement funds, mutual funds, banks, insurance companies, and things like that. And my guess is that this was an operation by Ceres, who we have mentioned on a number of occasions, because this is similar to a number that they've gotten. If it is, then it is General Motors, Ford, and Nike, Mars. You can just go down a list of huge organizations that are part of this thing, because these companies know that climate change is going to destroy them if they don't do something to get it under control. And really, when you think about it, the petroleum industry may represent a third of the biggest companies on Earth. But when you consider all companies of all sizes on Earth, fossil fuels are not dominant. They've been dominating because they've had their lobbyists, because they've been basically able to blackmail countries from time to time. But the financial organizations, the banks, the insurance companies, and so forth, are much, much, much bigger, and they stand to lose a lot more than the fossil fuel companies from climate change.
That's why they're so aware.
Yeah. And
The fossil fuel guys are concerned with stranded assets.
Yeah.
The investors are concerned with the future.
They are.
What they're going to make.
They are. And the people at Ceres have got a very interesting history. What happened was, after the Exxon Valdez oil spill, they decided as investors they wanted to stop that from happening in the future. So they spent years going around saying you should invest in green companies, you should invest in complex fluorescent light bulb manufacturers, whatever. And the people that they were talking to in the boardrooms of the companies were saying, oh yeah, ho hum, okay, yeah, next. And what happened was, sometime it was more than 10 years ago, somebody at Ceres suddenly had a realization that what they should be doing is saying to the banks and the insurance companies and the mutual funds and so forth, you need to examine the potential downside of climate change and the effect on your possessions, your portfolio, and so forth. And when
this is wise advice.
But the banks, having been warned, the mutual funds, the insurance companies, having been warned, felt that they were obliged to do something about this, just to check and make sure that this warning wasn't true if it wasn't true. And when they discovered it is true, they have to do something, and all of a sudden they were on board. And so Ceres had $16 trillion worth of, I think at the end of last year, it was $16 trillion worth of investors and $10 trillion worth of industries in two different
Trillion. Yep.
So they go to the President of the United States and they say, we need you to work. And he says, okay, what do you need me to do? Our next one is from CNN on the 12th of November. U.S. President Barack Obama and Chinese President Xi Jinping, and again, I don't get the intonation right, and I probably got the vowels, the consonants wrong, announced both countries will curb greenhouse gas emissions over the next 2 decades. The U.S. will cut back its 2000 level of carbon emissions by 26 to 28% before 2025, and quite frankly, I believe that we're going to exceed that. China will peak its carbon emissions and get 20% of its energy from zero carbon sources by 2030, and I think that China will exceed that. It'll all come in ahead of schedule, I think.
The only downside about this is that there's no enforcement mechanism. So they're saying this is what we're going to do, but if they don't do it, so what?
Yeah.
And I'm afraid, that they should have some sort of enforcement mechanism.
They should, but, they've got nature is a very effective enforcement mechanism.
Well, there's truth in that.
Okay, let's go on to our next one, and this, I think, is the story of the year.
Yes.
E.ON SE, Germany's largest utility, and I'm going to break in here and say this is the largest investor-owned utility in
the world, yep.
Will break itself up, spinning off fossil fuel plants into a separate company so it can focus on renewable energy. E.ON has also announced it will write down the value of assets by 4.5 billion euros, leading to a substantial full-year loss. Even so, the shares had the biggest jump in value in more than 2 years. When
That's an interesting juxtaposition there.
And this from Business Week on the 1st of December.
Yeah, they're doing the right thing, I think.
Very cool. And that tells you something about a big organization and what it thinks of climate change, global warming, renewables, the future of the grid, the future of Germany, the future of the world. It is, and this I think is a very, very hopeful plan that they've got. We're going to make it on renewable power.
Well, what impresses me is the nature of this corporation. These are investors. Mm-hmm. These, as I said before, they're not tree huggers. These guys are hard facts investors.
When the Energiewende was announced, they were kicking and screaming. They did not like it at all.
Yeah, and it's been a gem. It's been a total boon.
Absolutely. And now, finally, as we're coming to the end of our hour, the story of the year, which tops
The other one was the story of the year.
The other one was the story of the year, but this tops the story of the year.
Tops the story of the year.
Vermont Yankee has closed down.
Dun, 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 dun.
Vermont Yankee power plant stopped sending electricity to the grid on Monday. That was the 29th, after producing a total of 171 billion kilowatt hours over its 42-year lifetime. The shutdown came just after noon as the plant completed its 300th operating cycle, when workers inserted control rods into the reactor core and stopped the nuclear reaction process. This on the 30th of December, from the Washington Times.
Didn't we already cover this as part of the 20? We covered it twice.
No, we covered it twice today, because today we also recorded the news of the week, and that was news of the week.
That's why. Yeah,
That's
deja
why.
vu all over again.
Yeah, that's right. That's what it is. It's deja vu all over again. And for me, you know, I went through the news that I did for the week, and I went through the news that I did for every one of these shows for the year, which meant I saw it again there.
Yeah.
And then I did it when I got that list down to 144, that I was going to reduce it to here. I saw it again, and today, this morning, I saw it again, and now I just read it again. So it's deja vu all over again. And
So
again,
what's the
and
takeaway
again,
out of
and
this?
again,
What's
and
the
again.
top five?
The top five?
Yeah.
Well, these last two, I think, are
The top one and two.
the top one and two, and you can take them in any order you want, depending upon whether you've got a global outlook or a Vermont-centric outlook. The thing between President Obama and the president of China on the emissions, I think, is actually a very, very big one.
If they stick by it, and I kind of think they will.
I think they will, because the price is right. It's going to save both countries a lot of money. The Chinese have got a big nuclear program going, and honestly, they're still building coal plants. Why would they build coal plants? Those are expensive. They're going to have to shut them down soon. Why would they build them when
Well,
they
it's
can
China.
produce?
It's a command economy. They must have a lot of coal.
The Chinese.
Yeah.
Yeah, they have a lot of coal. They're trying to get people
I think it's
electrical
some of
power.
it's geography too.
Some of it is geography. This is not a balancing act where you can just take a bunch of balls that you're juggling that are all conventional power and then say, oh, I'm going to drop those and take this. It isn't that simple.
No, it's not. It's it's further complicated by the fact that China is very inscrutable.
Yeah. Yeah. Not as unscrutable as the countries in the Middle East, though.
Well, that's a whole nother story there. It's tragic what's going on there.
You mean ISIS and so forth?
Well, the whole United States going in there and doing regime change here, regime change there, turning countries topsy-turvy.
Well,
the death toll is well over 1 million.
Yeah, one of the things, I've always been fascinated by military history, and one of the things about military history, and this is something that you get if you just watch The Princess Bride, never get involved in a land war in Asia. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Do you know The Princess Bride?
No.
The guy is saying the great lessons are never get involved in a land war in Asia, and
that's an
something
axiom.
else, and then he says, and never come up against a Sicilian when death is on the line, and then he falls over dead because he's been poisoned by the other guy. Okay, we have to say goodbye.
Yeah, I guess we do.
We are at the end of our hour, and we're at the end of the list. And we have run out of things to say, so we might as well say goodbye.
I think that's a good idea.
Yeah, goodbye,
Goodbye, everybody, and have a Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, absolutely.
And looking back over this year, I would say that the reporting that we've done anyhow was quite optimistic.
Quite optimistic.
And I hope that the coming year is equally or more so.
I think it will
And I think it will be.
Yeah. See you later. Bye-bye. We spin and we toil, we work all day, sowing and reaping, we store goods away, so we can be dressed well on the day that we die. We dig and drill and waste what we find, break up the earth, leaving little behind, but we will grow lilies in the by and by. that the sun shines down its power to all the world and makes the wind blow strong as it will. I want to hope gentle rains can fall upon the land, so lovely earth can stay lovely still.